Hi, I'm David Marsh. Welcome to Exploring the Human Journey.
Exploring the Human Journey.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us today. I'm so excited. We've got author Jeffery C. Olsen with us today. He's the author of the book, I Knew Their Hearts, and author of the book, Beyond Mile Marker 80. We're going to talk all about it. You're going to love this. But first, I want you to watch this incredible video.
20 years ago, I had a near-death experience. My experience was the result of a horrific automobile accident which actually took the life of my wife and youngest son and banged me up incredibly. Both my legs were crushed, my left leg was amputated. I spent almost 6 months in the hospital and had 18 surgeries by the time they put me all back together. And what happened to me in this near-death experience, leaving my body and literally peeking into those realms of the other side, was not only enlightening and beautiful, but also confusing. It turned my whole world upside down when it came to beliefs, religions, what I thought, and now I had this experience of things I knew. Religion is not a bad thing. I think ceremony and ritual is important for us as we go through this process. What shifted for me was the meaning of those rituals, of those ceremonies, the deeper symbolisms of what was really going on, and then also finding this connectedness of all religions, you know, of all truth. It was like there was one big universal thing that really boiled down to pure, unconditional love. Now, when I left my body and literally found out I wasn't my body, I was conscious and existing in another realm, the other side, if you will, it's what I experienced there that really shifted everything. Some of my early feelings in that separation were fear and anxiety. I believed growing up that God was judgmental, that life was a test and I was probably failing. And yet what I experienced on the other side was that everything in my life was perfect, that everything that had happened, the accident, my parents' divorce, even the choices I had made that I experienced pain from were all part of my soul's progression. They were all perfect for the learning and experience of my soul. See, religion has divided us for so long. We pretend that God has a preference, that He wants us to do it this way or that way. And the wars and the strife over religion, even today, my experience was that we're all His children. We're all connected. We're all one. We are loved unconditionally. The human experience is a journey, and we're simply here to learn. And each and every one of us have the perfect experiences in our lives to provide the opportunities for us to learn what we came here to get, to really literally experience so that we know. Otherwise, how would we know? And by doing that, it takes us on this path where I've lost all judgments and comparisons. My path is my path, and it's perfect for me, but it doesn't have to look like someone else's or be like someone else's, nor do we all have to take the same path as we go through this beautiful thing called life.
Awesome, Jeff. That was incredible. I like the way you talk about we each have our own journey, and you've had quite a journey. You've written some books, you do events and seminars. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Wow. Well, after the experience, I mean, I had a job. I was a executive director at a marketing agency, advertising agency. And yet I just had this drive to step out and do something more. All of a sudden, life was different.
Yeah.
And recently, I've stepped away and formed an organization known as At One with Tracy Cohen, my partner in Boston. She's in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm out here in Estancia, Arizona.
Yeah.
So we've kind of got the country covered. But if it weren't for Tracy, that may have never happened. She and I met and we formed At One. And
the website?
You can find that. Yeah, that's at One Now. All written out, ATONENOW.com.
Yeah.
And you'll see all kinds of work we're doing, not only in the near-death experience, but with researchers, with medical doctors, with people that want to get into the science behind of all the mystical, spiritual stuff that goes on. We're doing events, we're publishing materials, we're supporting research and other things like that, and it's pretty exciting what's going on.
Yeah, I love the journey of consciousness, and that's one thing that helped me deconstruct from a fear-based religion was studying what happens after we die in the NDE. And so when I hear the stories of that, it really resonates. It really excites me. It gives me a glimpse into the other side. And then I find these scientists that their name has a PhD behind it, really smart people, and they're studying consciousness and what happens on the other side. And it's actually become a discipline now. Rather than just woo-woo, it's actually a scientific research model.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think the cool thing about it is everybody's always interested in what's happening after we die, what's happening on the other side. And yet, for me, what became far more important is what's happening here.
Yeah.
Now. It's like suddenly the fear of all of that went away.
Oh, that's good.
It's like, okay, you know, there's nothing to fear in death. There's nothing to fear in God or higher power, whatever you want to call it. But boy, what really matters is my day-to-day stuff. You know, what's happening right now, right here, and how am I being my part to make the world a better place, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because so many people have this fear of the cosmic judge. You're either going to get rewarded for good things or punished for bad things. And then if you take it to a fundamentalist extreme, you're in conscious eternal torment forever with no hope of getting out. And that's a tough paradigm to walk around in. And that was the narrative I had been given, which led me down like, I'm super sad, man. This sucks. Life is not exciting, because I had that mindset. And when I laid that down, I went, oh, the action's here. This is where it matters.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing that shifted for me. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, and I still love my Christianity. I still embrace that, because this Master Jesus had a lot of things that are very, very insightful for all of us. And yet what I also, you know, just got in touch with is maybe there's not just the one way. And obviously we're all different. I mean, if I was born in a different country with a different culture, I probably would be a different religion. And yet what I began to see was the underlying fabric of all religions. And that boiled down to love and compassion. And so often we forget that. You know, we're so committed to being right about our beliefs. And I'm using those things.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, beliefs. And if we could just grasp the fact that, okay, if our beliefs are just beliefs, then maybe we can begin to look beyond that a little bit. And if I'm willing to allow myself to be wrong in my beliefs, what else might be out there? Now, the cool thing is many of my beliefs became deeper, stronger, and far more meaningful. And by letting those other things go, I was able to embrace things that really brought me closer to the source, to God, if you will. Mm-hmm. And if there's a meaning or a purpose of religion, I think it's to bring us closer to that enlightened, beautiful truth of all there is. And if it's not doing that, then what's the point, right?
Yeah. I love how Neil Donald Walsh frames that in Conversations with God. He says, well, what's the right religion? And God says, the religion that brings you closest to me.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. You know, what is that interconnection? What are those things that you've found, those connecting pieces that have worked for you? And, you know, have you had to reshape a belief system and construct a new one? How's that been?
I would say I've expanded it. I mean, I've expanded it. For instance, I mean, a simple thing like prayer. Gosh, I used to believe that I was to kneel down and I would say it a certain way. And yet it all became about what I was saying.
Yeah.
And what has shifted for me now, it's about being still, shutting my mouth, and listening, and really connecting and finding out what the universe has for me, rather than what should I say to be right about what I'm saying, to
make sure you get protocol correct.
To deity that perhaps may judge me. Now, my prayers have always, you know, been from the heart, but like I say, it's shifted, where now it isn't as much talking as it is shutting up and listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you developed like a meditation practice or anything, a stillness, a mindfulness? Yeah,
I do a lot of those things. You know, number one, I began to look at the meaning behind ritual. A simple thing in Christian background, baptism. Well, what does it mean? Ooh. You know, what does it really mean? I mean, we do this, and I was baptized as a child and had not a clue of what the deeper things might be. So one of the practices is, okay, let's look at what's going on, what we're doing, but let's try to peel back all the, you know, rubble to what it really means, not only to me personally, but what does the symbol behind it mean? And not to get too caught up in all that, but even when I had the near-death experience, when I left the body, and suddenly wow, I could see clearly.
Yeah.
I knew everything. There was such insight. There was such enlightenment and this view of the perfection, not only of my own soul, but of everyone's. And it was like, wow, all of a sudden now I know. After that, I went to a baptism where they're, putting people under the water and coming up. And suddenly it was like, oh, wow, you know what? That's what this is. That's almost a symbol of life. Like we come into this mortality. We come into this crazy, foggy place where we can't hear, we can't see, we forget who we really are, just like being under the water.
Yeah.
And then boom, you come up out of it and, I can breathe, I can see. Now I remember what it was like, before I came in. I mean, to me, this symbolisms of we've always existed.
Yes.
That's something I learned.
So good.
And we knew our connection, we knew what we were, and yet now we come into this realm where we're experiencing almost what we're not.
Yeah.
That we know the difference between the two. And so I begin to see like these symbols in simple things like a baptismal ceremony, that it's like, wow, never thought of it that way before. I thought it was about washing my sins away and becoming worthy. And
so now I can be worthy.
Yeah. And, and I certainly felt that it may imply death and a resurrection at some point. But even at the premise of my Christian beliefs, and I'm not, like I say, I honor all of that, except that even at the premise of that, I was never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
I was never going to make it. I mean, there was no way. I mean, I could do all the ordinances, I could do all the exercises, but even in the end, my belief was somebody had to save me because of my own, creation. Even though biblically I was told I'm created in God's image, it was like, yeah, but I'm just not good enough.
Yes.
And that was
so good.
That was different. And so there was symbols like that. We talked about prayer. We talked about, ordinances and ceremonies and all the rituals that we do. I found great peace in some of the Native American practices.
Yes. Now tell me about that. You've experienced some of that shamanism in the Native American culture.
Yeah, I was trained, and it almost happened. I mean, my wife took me. After the accident, I remarried, and my beautiful wife said, "I know you're infatuated with Native American culture," which I had always been as a child. I mean, I write about this in my books. We had a Native American man wander onto the farm. I grew up on a farm, and he worked with horses. He was a true horse whisperer, but I began to see things like that. I studied a lot of different religions after my accident. I mean, Eastern philosophy, Western cultures, and anyway, stumbled into Native American shamanism and studied the Muneki, which all of a sudden there was all these symbols in there too that I just thought.
Now I don't know the word Muneki.
Muneki is it's a form of shamanism which is ancient. They say it came across the Bering Strait way, way, way back, so it probably goes clear back to Eastern philosophy.
Wow.
But there's a process, there's a number of rites, and here once again there's rituals, there's ceremony, there's all these things, but it's looking at the symbols of those things. And then looking at things different. For instance, if I compare my Christian beliefs to this new, way of looking at Native American beliefs, for instance, the serpent, the snake. Now, in my Christian beliefs, that's the devil, the evil. That's bad, that's evil, that's the devil.
Yeah.
And yet in the other, notion, well, the serpent is an honored symbol or archetype because it knows how to shed everything that no longer serves it. Just like when it sheds its skin, it would be like us letting go of all those things in our lives that no longer serve our highest good. And so it was like, wow, if I look at it differently.
Oh, that is good.
Then it's, there's a different belief there. But
shed the old because it doesn't serve your highest good. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, let go. Let go of the things that aren't progressing you, that aren't moving you forward, and that aren't bringing you joy in your life. And, I just use that as a simple example of how one belief system and another belief system might see the same archetype completely differently. And yet what brings your soul joy? What makes things really jump up and work? I loved in the Native cultures, they always had a male and a female to represent deity or the higher power.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, Mother Earth, Father Sky. And
because I'm given that narrative of God the male, and then the woman is created to help the man is underneath that, but it's that male patriarchal idea. And I really love the balance of the masculine and the feminine because that's part of everything. That's what the nature of us is.
Yeah, in fact, and here again, in symbols and things. Now, this isn't necessarily ritual, but I've made a habit of being up and around for every sunrise and observing every sunset.
Oh, beautiful.
Because in the belief system, here once again, it's beliefs, but it's when Father Sky touches Mother Earth, when they literally pass or connect and become one, symbolizing the unity and the oneness between the male and female and how we are meant to serve. You know, Father Sky giving light, giving answers, giving direction, where Mother Earth wants to hold us, nurture us, feed us, give us beauty. You know, so there's these beautiful symbols and things that you say, oh, okay, maybe the whole earth is literally teaching us what we're here to understand about the cosmic great realms of God, if we're only conscious and awake to it.
Yeah, it's such a good narrative. So ceremony and ritual, what were the things that were completely brand new to your frame of mind that you had been raised in? What were new things to you with ceremony and ritual?
Well, Sweat Lodge was something that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And yet it was very kindred to some of the things I had even done in my growing up and in my Christianity. I mean, going into the Sweat Lodge, being in silence, and yet realizing that it literally represents going into the womb, to be reborn into a new life, to let everything go in there, to sweat out all the, you know, all the bad stuff, whether that's physical or emotional sickness, dis-ease, getting rid of that, and then coming out in a whole new birth. So it wasn't necessarily brand new, but things that I had believed, oh, that's probably, I don't want to deal with that. That's different than my way.
If you don't understand it, you're afraid of it. It's bad.
Yeah, and then when you understand the meaning behind it, or the ritual behind it, you're like, well, wow, being born again was a very cool thing in Christianity, and to align the two and see that. And that's where it became really cool, was to find the common thread through all beliefs, which then brought me to, wow, we're all in this together.
Oh, so good.
You know, we laugh and say at home, God has no stepchildren. We're all in this together, no matter what color, creed, religion, background, culture, preference, I don't care. We're connected. We're in here as one. We can see the common unity of our beliefs and bring it to a place where really we can change the world. You know, all the strife and trouble we've had over beliefs and the desire to be right in our beliefs. I mean, it causes wars. It's way beyond. And yet if we knew how powerful we really were as creations after the divine, creating in God's image, whatever God is to you, we could literally come together, change things, and this whole world, we would bring heaven here. It would be right here.
Oh, that's so good. Jeffery C. Olsen in the house, bringing it. I love it, man. So you've had these transcendent experiences, whether it was in ceremony or you had a near-death experience, you've experienced this oneness. What's that feeling like in that space where you feel that oneness?
Wow. Are there words in any human language to...
Language is so limited, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wrote about this in my first book, being out of the body in the hospital and you know, just experiencing all the patients and doctors and nurses and parents of the patients and families and feeling them, experiencing them, seeing them. I don't know what word to use, but literally I was them. I became them, so I was experiencing this oneness and this unconditional love no matter what. You know, no matter what religion they were. I mean, everything from the heroin addict to the saintly grandmother, you know.
Were you like floating through the hospital and in like dreamland? I mean, what do you feel
it felt like I was moving without walking. It was like I was simply moving through the hospital without walking. Now, you know, my body was an absolute wreck, but here my soul was alive and well, more conscious, more feeling, having more insights than ever before. But that's where it started, and I realized, gosh, I would have been judgmental of these people.
Yeah.
I would have said, well, they brought in their own actions.
Yep, it's their own fault.
And yet here I was seeing them as beautiful and perfect. And I did have a biblical verse, and I'm sure that comes from my background. Now, there's many near-death experiences, and people often experience something from their religious beliefs.
Absolutely.
But I did have this beautiful verse come to me as I was experiencing all these souls around me. And it was the famous verse, "Inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of them, you've done it unto me."
Yeah.
Which I used to believe was a very nice verse about being nice to people.
Giving them a cup of cold water or
That's
whatever.
right. Now that all of a sudden the covers are peeled back, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What Jesus knew was that I am them. They are me. He saw himself as no better than the person in prison or the naked beggar on the street. And suddenly I was having that experience where I was so connected in oneness to them that they were me. I was them.
Yes.
And so a simple biblical verse like that all of a sudden expanded into, oh, wow, now I see it differently. And it was pretty cool.
Oh, that is so good. Yeah, Neil talks about in conversations with God about we're all this one thing and we've fractaled into these individual separations. And you actually felt that. You felt that you and me are the same thing. That person's having an experience, I'm having mine, but then you felt that connection. Now, I like the way you tell this, and then you say you saw a room and you didn't feel anything, and you saw a body, and then you realized.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was having this profound connection to everyone I saw. Then there was the body that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was odd. So I stepped forward to take a look and realized, oh my gosh, that's me. And yet it's not me. This is me. I'm here having this connected experience, but there's my body. There's my flesh. And that was an insightful thing too, because as I looked at the body, there was almost this narrative, not with words, but with this pure understanding. I was told, yeah, that's the temple. That's the temple. That's the Tabernacle of Clay. That's the only temple that you'll ever have to enter in to receive this beautiful gift of life. And so all of a sudden in all the rituals of temples, and many religions go to temples and enter into sacred holy places, this insight came that my body was the most sacred holy place I would ever enter, to be here, to have this experience, and then someday, you know, I would leave it behind and return to what I truly am with having had the experience of being in that tabernacle. And that was pretty insightful too.
Yes, I love it. So you actually physically understood the principle that we are not our bodies.
Yeah. I mean, that was very real to me as I sat and looked at the body, and yet I was not that.
Yeah.
And by being not that, I was experiencing life in a different way. I mean, even Paul talks about the body being the veil, you know, and I'm referring to biblical things because that was my background.
Agreed, yeah.
But here it's like, oh yeah, because when I'm out of the body, suddenly there is no veil. I'm seeing and loving people as God sees them and loves them, and yet I'm part of all that, which was a whole different, I mean, well, what are the words they use? The peace beyond understanding or something like that?
Yes, the peace that passes understanding.
And I was tasting that, and yet I was not in the body, and I knew that I was not that. But that was key to my experience in being here.
I like the way you frame that. We've always been here. We'll always be here. You're not a body, but you're having this human experience. We're a spiritual being having that human experience.
True.
So many people, we get caught up into this mindset that this is who I am, and we build this wonderful ego, and we just feed it, and how important I am, and look at all the accomplishments and the achievements. And those, when they're all stripped away, what you have is the true essence of the soul. And you experience that as absolute unconditional love and as pure light. And I like that concept of seeing the divine in other people rather than seeing the things that they're not. You're seeing the things that they are.
Yeah, and that was big. Now, there was all kinds of guilt around the accident. I was driving a car. You know, I mean, I was sober. I was going the speed limit, but I did have the cruise control set. And to my best recollection, I dozed off at the wheel just for a second. So there was all that goes with it too.
And who can't relate to that? We've all had those. I'll just close my eyes, and then the next thing you know.
Sure, but see, that's when I'm saying the experience here. There's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the unconditional love of others, the big one for me was learning to love and forgive myself.
Oh, wow.
You know, and again, these things popped up. I mean, someone like Jesus saying, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I always forgot the self part. I was really good at bringing cookies to the neighbors. But, but boy, to really focus on how do I forgive myself? How do I move myself out of this guilt? How do I reconcile this not only with God, but with me? I mean, that was.
I bet you're tore up. I mean, because here you're protecting your family, and then you feel like you haven't accomplished the mission of protecting your family.
Right, right. And, you know, the big one was self-forgiveness and self-love in spite of what had happened.
Yeah.
And yet maybe that's what I came here to learn.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Neil Donald Walsh, I love his little children's book, you know, The Little Soul in the Sun.
Yes.
And if I consider that, well, gosh, maybe that's what I wanted to learn was forgiveness. And maybe the whole universe knew the hardest person to forgive was me.
Wow.
And so out of pure unconditional love, the experience was played out where I would have the opportunity to have something so drastic happen that I really got to dig deep to find self-forgiveness and self-love. And when that began to happen, then I could truly love other people. I could truly love others because I had come to a place where I could love myself.
Can you share the experience of the oneness when you had the experience of seeing the baby in the divine?
Yeah, and it's interesting, my near-death experiences, you know, not that I need any validation, but they both happened before there was any narcotics involved. The first near-death experience was at the scene of the accident, leaving the body and wandering around the hospital and then getting back into the body. The other most profound experience was at the end of my hospital stay. After I was off of morphine, off of lower tab, I was simply taking some Tylenol. And I visited into those other realms, and I knew what that felt like leaving the body because of what I experienced at the accident. It felt like light came. It felt like I was surrounded by light that was so loving, it was like a warm blanket, and I began to feel a rise, like I was rising above the hospital bed. And in that experience, I just basked in this beautiful light, and then the light dispelled and went away, and I was in the most beautiful place, which what I would have called heaven in my belief system.
Sure, yeah.
But in my experience, it's like, this is home.
Oh,
I'm home. You know, I mean, that's what it felt like. It's like, I am home, and I begin to run.
Yeah.
Now, with my injuries and having both legs crushed and losing my left leg, I wasn't going to be running.
Oh,
but in this experience, I was running, and it was so beautiful, and I felt it. I felt it in a physical way, and I know that's odd because I'm apparently out of the body, but I was feeling the energy under my feet, firing up through my legs. I was running so joyful, thinking, I'm home. I'm home. And then I got the message, and like I say, it's not with words, but I knew I wasn't there to stay.
Yeah.
And at that same time, there was this corridor off to my left, and I knew intuitively I'm to go down that way.
Wow.
So I went down the corridor, and as I raced toward the end of the corridor, I saw at the end was this crib. So I raced to the crib and looked in. And there was my little son, the one I had lost in the accident.
Yeah. What was his approximate age around?
He was 14 months when we lost him. And there he was, 14 months, sleeping as soundly as and as peacefully. You know, about an hour before the accident, I'd peeked in the rearview mirror and just checked on him and thought, what a beautiful kid. He was sound asleep in his car seat. And yet here I was looking at him, and he was sleeping as peacefully and beautifully as I had seen him there. And I scooped him up. And that felt physical too. I could feel his body next to mine. I could feel his ribs expanding with breath. I could feel his breath on my neck. I'm like, how can this be? And I actually asked that, and every question I had, there was just a download of an answer. I said, how could this possibly be? And what I was told is everything is matter. Everything is tangible. It's just at a different level. You're at a higher vibration here, which is why I was feeling it in such an intense way. But I held my little son, and I began to weep, just thinking, wow, how could this really be? And that's when I felt this immense presence come up behind me. And it was so cosmic and overwhelming and powerful and kind, and yet so personal and so loving, but I didn't dare turn around. I mean, I still had that fear. Here I am holding my son. I know he's gone. I was driving the car.
Yeah.
It's my fault. And I had that fear split up of, oh my gosh, I did this. I took his life in some way because I crashed the car.
Yep.
And my thought was, I hope I'm forgiven.
Oh, wow.
But it was at that point when I had that thought as I held him weeping, grateful I could say goodbye, but hoping that this would all be okay in the eternal realm somehow. I felt almost physically as if those divine arms just wrapped around and held me.
Wow.
And the message came, there's nothing to forgive.
Mm.
It's all in perfect order. And then it's like the lid just came off and there was just a download, a dump of truth, knowledge, light, love, trust. I saw my whole life. I began to judge it. I would think, oh, that was a mistake.
Oh, wow.
But what was being communicated was, well, that's your judgment of it,
Yep.
not mine. I saw things that I had done wrong, and I knew they were wrong, and I did them anyway.
Yeah.
But all I felt was this absolute unconditional love. And it almost felt like a whole universe. It's like, we love you.
Mm.
Your life is perfect. You created it. And that was a big shift. See, I would have believed that God did this to me.
Yeah.
It's his fault.
Yep.
He threw this in my path to test me, to
And
see
a lot
if
of
I
people
could...
get angry about
Right,
that. Yeah.
right. And yet here, somehow in this strange thing, it's when those divine arms wrapped around me. And this has taken me a long time to say, it's almost like I became God. I became all of it.
Yeah.
I saw with such understanding and such compassion, even for myself and my own life. And it was as if I created it. I came and created the life experience that I wanted to have, that my soul would have this, development that it wanted. And it was so powerful. There really aren't words to describe it except that it was all love. There was no judgment. It was unconditional love. And then I was given the opportunity to choose. And the choice was, you can be angry because your family was torn away. You can feel guilty and beat yourself up your whole life because you were driving the car. Or, in this opportunity, I will honor free will and choice. That's the only rule of the entire universe, is your choice. You can choose to give your son back. And that way you're exercising your will in the whole scenario. And in that perfect love and in all that light, I was able to kiss my little boy and hand him back. And then I woke up in the hospital bed, back to the amputation and the leg and the shoulder and the back and all the injuries. But I realized everything is a choice and that I am the creator of my own existence.
Yep.
There's no one to blame. There's no one to honor beyond just what I choose of making it. What to honor is the choice.
Yep.
And what do I choose to make of it no matter what happens?
Oh, that is so good. So many people get into that fear state of somebody somewhere has decided that I have a lot in life.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do about my circumstances. And you may have circumstances,
Oh, yeah.
but you get to internally decide how you want to respond to those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, and not that life isn't difficult. I mean, to say I didn't have challenges and I don't still have challenges would not be true.
Yeah.
But I get to choose how I experience those challenges. And, it's going to happen to everybody. Everybody gets their turn where something goes wrong, something devastating happens, something, somebody dies. I mean, you get sick, you lose a limb, whatever it is. And it might be much simpler. Our experiences are so diverse, but the human emotion is universal. We all know what grief feels like. We all know what pain feels like. We all know what love and joy feels like. That's what connects us all, is that emotion. And we're going to have our turn of experiencing those emotions. And yet now, even if I feel angry, like on the way here, somebody cuts me off on the street, I can say, wow, what a gift to feel that, to be alive and to say, hallelujah, I get to feel that. Or to have a blue day of sadness and think, well, what a poignant emotion that is. And then to have those days of absolute joy or absolute love or absolute elation and say, gosh, I'm getting my money's worth. I came and entered into this body.
Yeah.
I'm going to go have my experience. I'm going to get my money's worth, and I'm going to go home and say nothing but thank you.
Yeah.
You know, absolute gratitude for letting me have every emotion, every experience, every woe, every victory, and literally honor God, honor the universe, honor myself for having said, wow. What a cool thing to do.
Oh, that is so good. Thank you for sharing that, because that has been something I've been able to reframe in recent time, where I've been able to say, this is an experience I get to have.
Yeah.
Too many years of my life were spent like, I can't wait till I get out of this place and get to heaven. Because I was taught that's the whole thing. I'm a problem to God. He had to solve that problem. That's what Jesus came to do, was be substitutionary atonement. And then it's just, you just got to endure to the end, brother.
Just got to endure and hold on.
Persevere. And then all the verses to reinforce that belief system, you know, they're going to persevere, or they're going to persecute you, but you stand strong in the faith. And it's like, my life's going to suck for how many years? And then it's just an awful narrative. But instead to realize, hey, I chose to come here. I wanted to have this experience. In fact, it's made me be able to love myself now, because I had a hard time doing that before, because I had that innate unworthiness programmed in. Now I can say, I chose to come here and to be David Marsh. I chose the time I was born. I chose the family I was born into. Instead of being frustrated about circumstances, I can say, I get to experience this, and I get to have the pain and the suffering, and I get to have the pleasure and the beauty. It is so beautiful when you can reframe like that.
Yeah, I love that word, choose.
Yeah.
I choose this. I choose to feel angry in this moment. I choose to be joyful in this moment. I choose free will and choice. I mean, if I have a belief, it is that free will and choice is the governing law of the entire universe. It's what we do. It's what we create, and it's what we make of it. And it's the difference and the contribution we have right now, today, in our own home, in our own community, that really matters. Oh,
so good. I remember when my kids were little, you know, one would hit the other and say, you know, why'd you hit them? Well, they did something to me, and, you know, they made me angry. And I remember saying to my kids, no one can make you angry. You make yourself angry. So you have, you know, trying to give them a little psychology, but yet I couldn't do that to myself. Then I still had that, you know, feeling of being sad or whatever, and I just felt like the circumstances. And now, if only I would have had the understanding, you know, I wouldn't have spent years where I was just bummed out because the world's going to hell, and I have to try to proselytize them to my belief system. You know, it's so much better when you realize you're here because you get to experience it. Well, now I'm not trying to get on the rapture bus to get out of here. I want to stay here because this is where the action is.
Yeah, and we're simply here to learn. That's the beautiful part of it. We're simply here to learn. And raising children, I mean, gosh, you know, isn't that one where you kind of step outside of yourself? And you know, my kids are mostly grown up now. My youngest is now 17 and 6'2", you know. But
so now the child that you had in the accident, the two of you had survived. How has that been with your relationship?
Oh, it's been fantastic. Me and my oldest son, he was only 7 at the time of the accident, and we have always been very close. Even when he struggled, he could at least talk to me. You know, it's funny. You bring him up. He called me last night.
Oh, wow! And
he calls me all the time. You know, but it was one of those phone calls. He's 27 years old. He's married. He's working. He's working to get his master's degree in child psychology. He wants to work with traumatized children.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
And he'll be perfect based on what he's experienced. But it was one of those phone calls where here's my adult 27-year-old son, and he said, "Dad, I was just thinking about you, and just wanted to call and tell you I love you, and that you were on my mind." Now, you know, I get emotional over stuff like that. He's a big strapping lad too, but it's those little poignant moments. And, you know, I mean, with all the injuries I went through, and people have said, "Oh, you must have been preserved for a great cause." I'm like, yeah, to take that phone call. You know, I mean, it's the little things. It's those little things that become the big things. And, you know, but our relationship has been great. I mean, he struggled. He had hard times. And that was perfect for him. I mean, now I look at him, and what a man with depth, you know, of character and love and compassion. And his wife is just charming. I mean, she's beautiful. So now I have a daughter in the family too, which is very cool. And
awesome.
And yeah, life has been very good, but we've certainly walked our path and we've certainly learned a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. With your foundation, you're doing events, you're doing work. Tell me about the events that you're doing around the country.
We're doing all kinds. We just got back from Salem, Massachusetts. Did an event with one of my trauma staff. In fact, the head trauma doc who was in the level 1 trauma hospital that they flew me into. He had an incredible experience, and he didn't talk about it publicly.
While treating you.
While treating me. And he wasn't necessarily, hands-on. He was overseeing it.
But he was part of the process.
Yeah. And he shared this with me at one point when I was still in the hospital, that my deceased wife, who had left the scene, killed instantly at the scene of the accident. We had left the scene and been life-flighted clear into a level 1 trauma center. She appeared to him in the trauma room and communicated to him. Now, that wasn't something he was really comfortable talking to others about.
Because he doesn't want his peers to think he's crazy
That's
or
right.
anything.
You don't walk around saying, I see dead people.
Yeah.
He had shared that, and now he's actually opened up and been willing to talk about it. So we were just in Salem, Massachusetts, talking about that and his perspective, not only in my accident, but many others, as an ER trauma doctor, and what he sees and experiences. We've got a big event coming up in Sedona in February, which is all about human triumph. Those that have just overcome incredible things in their lives and yet risen to a new level of service, compassion, and just being a light, to everyone around them.
Oh, that's good.
We've got a huge cast of characters on that. Oddly enough, I was looking at the roster last night. All our keynote speakers who are all about human triumph, they've all had a near-death experience, which I find, didn't plan it that way, but as I looked at everything from someone who was kidnapped, last thing she remembers is being injected and stuffed in a duffel bag and put into human trafficking.
Oh my God.
7 years old, woke up in a different country in a military camp, and yet overcame that, grew. She was actually shot, had a near-death experience, left for dead, but she's overcome and found her way home. Another woman that was run down in a racial hate crime, dragged under a pickup truck for 100 yards and backed over and left for dead, but yet has overcome and healed and had amazing things. Another fellow, late stages AIDS, went into hospice, died, had a near-death experience, came back and miraculously healed, still HIV positive, but over the real sickness, and just making that all these people are contributing and making a huge difference in the world based on what they know about the human soul, about our divinity, about our dignity. And that's going to be a cool one in Sedona. We're doing another one in April. We're working, it could potentially be at Harvard, but it'll be back in Boston, but it's all medical doctors who have had either near-death experiences or have brushed with that as they treat people in ER trauma centers. We've got a cardiologist coming in clear from Amsterdam. We've got 2 ER trauma docs, and then we've got a orthopedic surgeon coming in who have they're willing to talk about the spiritual side in the medical community, which is really cool too. So
these are 2018 dates. If you're listening to this as a podcast years down the road, this happened in 2018. This episode will be out prior to that. It'll be out in January. So at One Now, that's where people can find this at?
Yeah, at onenow.com. Go there. We have a whole schedule of events. There's videos. There's research papers. There's fun photos as we go around the world doing different things. We've actually instituted an At One Day that's November 11th every year. November 11th. So 11/11 at 11 a.m. for 11 minutes.
Yeah.
You just get into your heart and do whatever it is that you know will bring more compassion, more peace, more love, more unity into the world, and be your part in that moment and watch what shifts the consciousness of humankind.
Now, that special guest you're talking about, the NDE, is that Robert Tremblay?
Yeah. Robert's going to be one of our speakers in Sedona.
Hey, audience, he's next week's episode, so you definitely want to tune in to see that one.
Yeah, and he's an amazing guy. Ami Gaston out of Los Angeles is a woman that was run down in the road and left for dead, and now she sings. And then Robin Landsong is the young woman that was kidnapped and taken into human trafficking and war zones in Africa in the late 70s, and yet overcame and triumphed over that. It's a huge huge tribute to human triumph, knowing that we all are triumphant. That's just it. When one rises, we all do, and that's what's cool.
So good. This is a Sedona event. People can sign up. Do you have a capacity? I mean, is it a large space?
We've got a large enough ballroom to hold enough people to accommodate anybody who wants to come. And
but it's the type of thing where you don't want to try to get signed up to the event and find out that it's been sold out. So I imagine the faster you get involved in this, the better it is.
Yeah, well, tickets will be available next week. So if you're watching this live, you'll want to go to atOneNow.com and get your tickets and get your seat. But we're looking for a crowd at that one. So
that's really transformative, the way you're bringing people together. And one thing that transforms the human journey is hearing other people's stories. So I give you gratitude for sharing your story, because that's very personal to say, I lost family members. You've expressed the grief you've went through. You've expressed the spiritual experiences you have. That may not seem to you very bold, but that's a very bold thing to do.
Well, thank you. And it took years. I was not right out of the chute able to communicate, nor did I really want to share all of that. I had to just sit and let it gel for a while. But at this point, I know that's what I'm here for. That's part of the reason I'm here, and we get to share our stories. We all have stories. That's what's so cool. I mean, from the caveman days, we sat around the fire and shared our stories.
That's it.
Now it's Facebook. We're all saying, here's what I'm doing. We're posting on the wall, like putting your handprint on the cave wall, saying, this is what I did today. I hunted 3 deer, and or whatever it is you're doing. But as humans, we do love connecting and learning and inspiring each other through our stories. It's a big deal. That's what's cool about what you're doing, is this.
I love it. I feel like everyone has a story, and I want to be able to help share those stories. And that's what Exploring the Human Journey, our show, is about, is exploring your journey and hearing the things that you went through. And I really like the way you frame that. We're all in this together. So there's this connection that we have. And you've really brought some great insight to let people know you're here for a reason. You're here for a purpose. What do you feel your purpose as it is continuing to unfold? How do you feel you're playing that role?
Wow. That's a big question. My purpose is to love. I mean, it's interesting. In all of my out-of-body or near-death experiences, there was a question that was posed. And the only question I was asked was, to what degree have you learned to love? And that was it, So if I have a purpose here, it's to love, and it's to be my part in bringing about more love, more oneness, more unity, more peace. And gosh, I'm just one guy. But one guy can make a big difference if we lean in and do what we're sent here to do.
Yeah, that's great. So you weren't asked about how many gold medals you had.
No.
You weren't asked if you got a great SAT score. You weren't asked if you got your PhD in whatever. You were asked, did you love more? Or did you love?
To what degree?
To what degree?
It was very, and here again, it wasn't with words. It was just this knowledge.
In fact, there's not even judgment there. To what degree?
To what degree
it's like a self-assessment.
have you learned to love?
Oh, that's so deep.
It was, because certainly I loved my family. Certainly I loved, good food. Certainly I mean, there's so many different levels of love, but to what degree had I learned to love? And at this point, now looking back 20 years, wow, was the whole communication about myself? Have I learned to the degree that I'm willing to love myself? And by doing that, does that open a door to really truly love others?
Oh, that's so good. So there are people that have this, I'm not worthy, I don't have any value, whether they do something that's self-destructive or something that's a diversion. What do you tell that person?
The interesting thing, I love asking questions. I mean, if I tell somebody something, then that's my opinion.
Agreed.
Often I'll say, what are you creating with all that? What is it you want to experience? What is it you're here to learn? I mean, and often if I talk to people, gosh, it's their life. It's their choice. If I honor free will and choice without judgment like I experienced in the other realms, I promise you they have their own answers. And they'll say, well, this happened and it caused me to feel like that. And then I begin to do this and that became a mask for that. And you know, they have all their own answers. I don't have their answers. So I don't tell them anything, but I'll often ask them questions and let them find their own path, their own way, and simply honor it as they do and be willing to walk with them as they have their own journey, which could be much different than mine, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. How do you use that intuition when you're, whether you're giving someone advice, do you use it with them, or do you use it like you feel well, I should work on this? How do you use your intuition?
Oh, well, you know, I equate it to instincts. I mean, it's really funny. I love it out here in Arizona watching the animals. You know, we got coyotes and birds and stuff, and I sit out in the backyard and look at them. They all have instincts. They just know. They just know where to go. They know where to be. They know where the food is. They know where the water is. They know what to do. And I found within myself, if I just trust my instincts, if I just get all that belief, all that everything out of the way, and say, what does my heart say? That I know too. I mean, we're as good as the animals are, or we're equal to them anyway. And we have instincts too. I tell my boys that all the time. Trust your instincts. And so for me, it's just literally going in my heart, listening to what my own instincts or intuitions say. And if we are divine and connected to divine, then that is the revelation, if you will. And that's what I choose to act on. So.
Oh, that's so good. Now, as I look at this book, I Knew Their Hearts, foreword by Dr. Raymond Moody. So that guy's the godfather. In 1975, he wrote a book called Life After Life. He was the first guy to kind of put all these things together, and he called this thing a near-death experience. He kind of coined the term. And I noticed you got a foreword by Dr. Raymond Moody.
Yeah. Dr. Raymond Moody's become a friend of mine, and there's no accidents in life. Before I ever wrote the book, this was a friend of a friend. Dr. Moody was coming to Salt Lake City. This is when I lived in Utah. And I got a call from a friend of a friend that said, hey, gosh, could you pick him up at the airport? We've got to get him to the hotel.
You've got to be kidding.
Is there any way you could break away from work and go get him? We had our ride fell through. Something happened. So I went and picked up Dr. Raymond Moody. I'd never met him.
Did you know who he was at the time?
I knew who he was.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know the extent of who he was. I knew he was a famous NDE guy. Yeah. Well, I picked him up. I said, I'll take you to the hotel. Are you hungry? Would you like to eat? He says, I'm actually starving. I said, well, there's a nice little place over here. So we sat down and went to lunch. And he asked me, have you ever had a near-death experience? He's one of the first people I literally publicly said, yeah, I actually have. I don't talk about it. What? This is before I wrote the book or anything.
Oh, wow.
And he said to me, he said, you're going to write a book and I'm going to write the foreword.
Oh, my goodness.
And sure enough, you know, fast forward several years and we had stayed connected. And I said, I am writing that book. Are you still willing to do the foreword? And he said, absolutely. And he's written the foreword. And I love Dr. Moody. He's a great guy. And he insists I call him Raymond. Yeah, we've had several brushes over the years. But yeah, he was a man of his word. He said, you're going to write a book and I'm going to write the foreword. And sure enough, it came to pass.
Yeah, so. Yeah, he's fascinating. I've seen many things that he's been a part of, content, whether it was video or podcasts. Yeah, he's been really important in my journey, just exploring what happens after we die and understanding the near-death experience. And then you know, it's such a fun journey then to get to talk with people that said, well, you're not just going to hear it in a book. I'm actually this person telling you the story. And in fact, if you want to read more depth, I've actually written a book. And I'm like, amazing. I think this is really important for people to, you know, make sure get resources, support the work of people that are doing these things. Jeff is fascinating. He's got such depth of insight, and he's captured it in pages on paper. And that's a way that we can reach out, we can touch, we can be supportive of the work that he's doing, his website at onenow.com. I encourage you to go there, find out what Jeff's doing and all the wonderful things, and be a part of connecting, be a part of community.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I like to end the show with the guest kind of giving someone a little bit of peace, a little bit of calm, and if there's one thing that we can take away from your work and what you're doing here, what is that one thing you want people to know?
That they have a choice and that they can literally choose joy, even in the darkest of circumstances. They can choose joy. They can choose to be at one in their relationships, within themselves, with their Creator. But it really is in their hands, and they are powerful, divine beings who can do it.
Awesome. Man, you did so much today. Did you cover it all?
I hope so. I don't know. I talked a lot. I feel like I talked too much.
You did.
So I don't know what else we would talk about.
So good.
Unless there's more questions you want to cover, I don't know.
So good. Jeff, I really appreciate you being on the show, man.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thanks.
I'm David Marsh, and you've been watching Exploring the Human Journey on YouTube as a video and listening as a podcast. If you would like to help continue the conversation, please consider supporting us by visiting patreon.com, where you can support us on a monthly basis and get extra bonus content. For as little as $1 a month, you can make this show sustainable and help continue spiritual consciousness. You can also help by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information about the show, find us online at exploringthehumanjourney.com.